September 12, 1943, West Texas. The desert stretched endless under a merciless sun, heat rippling off sand and mesquite like molten glass. Somewhere in that vastness, a German prisoner of war named Johann Kramer ran, his boots leaving tracks in the hardpan, his throat raw with thirst and desperation. Behind him, Camp Commander Colonel James Maxwell followed those prints on horseback, tracking a man he thought he understood. Before we continue, if you're finding this story as gripping as we do, hit that like button and subscribe to stay connected with more untold stories from history. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. Maxwell had pursued escaped prisoners before. He expected defiance, perhaps violence, maybe a man clinging to Nazi ideology even in the wilderness. What he found instead would shatter everything he believed about the enemy, about humanity, and about the strange war being fought in America's heartland. And in that moment, tracking those desperate boot prints into the emptiness. He couldn't have known that this chase would prove his entire philosophy right or expose how fragile that philosophy truly was. Camp Bowie sat in the West Texas desert like a wound on the landscape, barbed wire and wooden barracks where temperatures reached 115 degrees by midday. Dust devils danced between guard towers. The horizon swallowed hope and distance in equal measure. Over 3,000 German prisoners of war lived there, most captured in North Africa after Rommel's Africa Corps collapsed under the weight of Allied armor and logistics. They had arrived by train, cramped in POW cars, their gray-green uniforms stained with desert sand and defeat, their eyes hollow with the knowledge that their war was over. Johann Kramer had arrived in May of 1943. 23 years old, a corporal from Stuttgart. He'd been captured at Tunis when his supply convoy was overrun by American tanks that seemed to appear from nowhere, endless columns of steel that the propaganda had never prepared him for. The party had promised him that Americans were brutal, that prisoners faced torture and execution, that surrender meant death. The reality proved stranger and more unsettling. The guards carried rifles but rarely raised them. The barracks had screens on the windows to keep out mosquitoes. The mess hall served portions larger than anything Johann had eaten in 2 years of military service. At night, the prisoners heard music drifting from the American quarters. Jazz. That degenerate music the party had forbidden. Sometimes laughter followed, genuine and unguarded. "They feed us like kings," Karl Weber whispered in the barracks that first night, his voice uncertain and confused. Why? Johann had no answer. The Geneva Convention required adequate food, but this felt different, something beyond mere obligation. The bacon at breakfast was real. The coffee was hot and strong. The bread was white and soft, not the sawdust-mixed rations they'd survived on in Africa. Nothing made sense anymore. Colonel James Maxwell ran Camp Bowie with a philosophy that bewildered both his guards and his prisoners. 47 years old, a veteran of the First World War who'd seen enough of human cruelty in the trenches of France to last a lifetime. He believed that brutality bred resistance while humanity dissolved it. He had watched bitterness poison men's souls in those muddy trenches 25 years earlier. He refused to let his camp become another breeding ground for the hatred that had started this war in the first place. "These men are soldiers, not monsters," he told his staff during orientation. "Treat them with the dignity their uniforms deserve, and most will respond in kind." The other officers thought him dangerously soft. The prisoners suspected psychological warfare, waited for the trap to spring, for the kindness to reveal itself as manipulation. But weeks passed, and no trap came. Only work details in the surrounding farms, picking cotton under the vast sky, repairing fences, hauling irrigation equipment. The farmers paid the U.S. government, which paid the prisoners in camp scrip worthless paper money good only at the canteen, where they could buy cigarettes, candy, writing paper. Johann worked the fields 6 days a week. The labor was hard but honest, nothing like the degradation he'd expected. The American guards watched but rarely interfered. The farmer who owned the land, a weathered man named Tom Hutchins, sometimes brought cold lemonade to the work crews, his teenage son helping distribute tin cups. "Drink up," Hutchins would say, his accent thick as molasses. "Plenty more where that came from." Johann drank, the tartness cutting through the dust in his throat, and felt confused by this kindness from a man whose country he had tried to destroy. By midsummer, the heat became unbearable. Men collapsed in the fields. The guards called for water, for shade breaks, for medical attention. This, too, confused Johann. He had been taught that Americans valued efficiency over humanity, that capitalism made men into machines. Yet here they were, stopping work to care for prisoners who meant nothing to them, who had tried to kill their sons and brothers overseas. The contradictions gnawed at him. At night, Johann wrote letters home to his mother in Stuttgart. The censors read everything, so he kept his words careful and neutral. He described the heat, the endless sky, the strange food. He did not describe the confusion growing in his chest, the slow erosion of everything he had been taught to believe. The other prisoners noticed it too. In the barracks after dark, men whispered about the contradictions, the kindness that didn't align with propaganda, the humanity that shouldn't exist in the enemy. "They're weakening us," Klaus Bauer insisted, a hard-eyed sergeant from Munich who still wore his party pin hidden in his boot. "Making us forget who we are, what we fight for. This is psychological warfare." But Weber shook his head slowly. "Or maybe we were lied to." The words hung in the darkness like smoke. No one responded. The idea was too dangerous, too destabilizing. If they had been lied to about this, what else was a lie? August brought no relief from the heat. The desert shimmered like a fever dream, mirages pooling on the horizon, promising water that didn't exist. Inside the camp, tension simmered beneath the surface courtesy. Johann noticed it first in the letters that arrived or didn't arrive. His mother's correspondence had been regular until July, then stopped completely. Other prisoners reported the same. The censors provided no explanations. The Red Cross packages that usually came monthly were delayed. Then came the newspapers. Maxwell allowed the prisoners to receive German-language papers from New York, heavily censored but still containing news from home. The July edition spoke of increased bombing raids on German cities: Hamburg, Stuttgart, Cologne. The pages showed photographs of ruins, of ash, of survivors walking through rubble like ghosts. Johann stared at a photograph of a Stuttgart street he recognized, now reduced to broken walls and twisted steel. His mother lived 3 blocks from there. The letter he had been waiting for would never come. He sat on his bunk that night, the newspaper crumpled in his fists, and felt something break inside him. Not his loyalty to Germany that remained, confused and complicated as it was, but his ability to accept his imprisonment peacefully. His mother might be dead. His city was burning, and he was here in this strange, comfortable cage, picking cotton for farmers who smiled and offered lemonade while his world ended across the ocean. Klaus Bauer sensed the shift immediately. He moved through the barracks like smoke, whispering to men whose eyes had gone hollow with grief, whose hands shook with impotent rage. "We are soldiers," he hissed to Johann one night, "not cattle. We have a duty to resist, to escape, to return to the fight." Johann's response was hollow. "There's nowhere to go." But his voice lacked conviction. "Mexico," Bauer said, his eyes gleaming with desperate certainty. 300 miles south, the border. From there, we make contact with sympathizers, find passage back to Germany." It was fantasy, desperation masquerading as strategy. Mexico had joined the Allies. There were no sympathizers waiting with open arms. The distance was impossible on foot through desert that killed experienced travelers. But Johann's mother was dead or dying or trapped in ruins while he ate bacon and picked cotton under the endless Texas sky. The logic didn't matter anymore, only the need to act, to do something, to be a soldier again instead of a comfortable prisoner. 3 others joined the plan. Werner Schultz, a quiet farm boy from Bavaria; Hans Dietrich, a tank commander from Berlin; Karl Vogel, a pilot shot down over Tunisia. 5 men bound together by grief and desperation and the illusion that they could cross a desert and somehow make a difference in a war happening 5,000 miles away. They planned for 2 weeks, saved bread from meals, stole extra canteens from work details, studied guard rotations, fence weaknesses, blind spots in the searchlight patterns. Maxwell noticed something changing in the camp's atmosphere. He couldn't pinpoint it exactly, just a tension in the air. Conversations that stopped when guards approached, eyes that wouldn't quite meet his during inspections. "Keep alert," he told his sergeant. "Something's brewing." But he didn't increase patrols or tighten restrictions. Maxwell believed in his philosophy, trusted that the humanity he showed would prevent exactly this kind of desperate act. He was about to learn how wrong even the best intentions could be. September 11th, 1943. The moon hung thin as a blade. Johann waited in his bunk until the guard finished his round, counted to 100, and rose silently. The others were ready, boots worn to bed, supplies hidden beneath thin blankets. No words passed, gestures and military training sufficed. The fence near the laundry building was weak. They had loosened it over weeks. Werner went first, crawling under like a snake. Johann held his breath as the wire snagged his shirt but didn't tear. One by one, Hans, Karl, and Klaus Bauer followed. Bauer turned to Johann. "For Germany," he whispered. Johann nodded, unsure if Germany meant the rubble of Stuttgart, Huchen's kindness, propaganda, or the desert reality. Johann crawled under, sand cool against his palms, and stood free, breathing the same air but feeling it different. They ran south, North Star guiding them, boots crunching on hardpan and stones. By 2 a.m., Johann shivered, lungs burning, legs aching, yet he pressed on. At dawn, they found a dry wash under a rock overhang, ate sparse bread, drank cautiously, and tried to rest. Johann lay awake, thinking of his mother. If she lived, would she want him to die here? If dead, what had been the point? By late afternoon, Maxwell knew. The head count showed 5 missing. The fence breach and boot prints confirmed it. Standing at the gap, hat in hand, he felt the weight of failure. He believed in kindness transforming enemies. 5 Germans had just tested that faith. "Gather a search party," he ordered. "Horses, water, medical supplies. They have maybe 30 hours before the desert kills them." He refused state or military police involvement. This was his responsibility. The sun set as Maxwell rode out with 6 men, following disciplined boot prints south. These were soldiers, not criminals. The second day dawned hot and merciless. Johann's lips cracked, tongue swollen. Werner burned red, breathing shallow. Hans supported him. Karl insisted, "We need water, or we're dead." Hours passed, dry stream beds empty. Joshua trees, prickly pear, rattlesnakes, and vultures surrounded them. Klaus Bauer raved about German destiny, but Johann focused on survival, keeping Werner upright. Then they saw the windmill. Rising from the desert, its blades turned lazily, pumping water into a wooden trough. They ran, abandoning all discipline, plunging faces into the cool water, splashing over burnt skin. Johann lay in the mud, water soaking his clothes, tears mixing with it not joy, but shame. This was what they had become, animals crawling in mud, surviving while pretending a higher purpose justified it. "We rest here," Klaus decided, his voice still carrying command authority. "Wait for night, then continue." But they weren't alone. Maxwell had been tracking them through the heat, his horse covering ground faster than men on foot. He had seen the windmill from a mile away, had known his prisoners would head for it like moths to flame. He approached slowly, his rifle across his saddle but not pointed, not threatening. His men spread out behind him in a loose semicircle. The Germans didn't notice until Maxwell was 30 yards away. Klaus Bauer reached for a rock, ready to fight, to die rather than surrender. "Don't," Maxwell called, voice calm. "Please, don't make me shoot you." Johann, water dripping from his clothes, met his eyes. The desert held its breath. "You came alone," Johann said in broken English. "Not alone," Maxwell gestured to his men, "but not with an army. You're soldiers, not criminals. I wanted you to surrender to someone who understands." Klaus spat in the mud. "We won't surrender. Your friends are dying. One won't survive another day without care. You can die here as heroes or live as men." "Your choice," Maxwell said gently. Johann looked at Werner, blood on his cracked lips, chest heaving, and thought of his mother in Stuttgart. He thought of the small kindnesses Hutchins, lemonade, the desert windmill that had eroded the propaganda he'd believed. "Why did you come yourself?" he asked. "Because how we treat enemies defines us. You ran because you're in pain, desperate. That doesn't make you evil. It makes you human." Maxwell held out a canteen. Johann drank, hands shaking, feeling the last remnants of ideology break. "We surrender," he said quietly. Klaus cursed, tried to run. Maxwell's men caught him without cruelty. They rode slowly to Camp Bowie, Werner supported between guards. The sunset painted the desert gold. Johann finally understood Maxwell. The true battle wasn't nations or ideologies, but cruelty versus compassion. Here, compassion had won. At the camp, Werner was rushed to the infirmary. The others were placed in detention for protection. Regulations demanded punishment, but Maxwell saw something different in Johann. Understanding, not defiance. "Why didn't you fight?" Maxwell asked. "My mother is dead or alive. Dying in the desert wouldn't help Germany. It wouldn't accomplish anything except proving I was too stupid to accept kindness." Maxwell nodded. "Some think I'm too soft, that I should have let you die as an example." "Maybe kindness is foolish," Johann said softly. "Or maybe it's the only thing that can end wars, not fighting, but hatred underneath. You'll serve 30 days in detention. Light work, regular meals, then back to the main camp. Your choice." "I won't run," Johann replied. The 30 days passed slowly, but not cruelly. Johann worked, reflecting on the desert. Klaus Bauer was transferred, still clinging to ideology. Werner recovered, his faith in Nazi propaganda shattered. Hans and Karl quietly acknowledged that their enemies had been more human than their leaders. When Johann returned to the main camp, the other prisoners watched him with new eyes. Hutchins approached first during a water break. "Heard you took a walk in the desert," he said, offering lemonade. "Yes, sir," Johann replied, thinking of the wasteland, the vultures, and the windmill that had saved them. "No, sir, nothing but death and foolishness." Hutchins nodded. "Desert will teach you that lesson if you let it. Survival requires cooperation, not fighting. Same's true of life." He handed Johann the lemonade and walked away, leaving the words to settle like dust. Over the following months, Johann watched the war from his desert cage. Newspapers reported Allied advances, German retreats, cities falling. Each defeat felt like vindication. The ideology that had led him here was lies. Humanity mattered more than national pride. He wrote to the Red Cross searching for his mother. In December, a reply came. She had survived the bombing of Stuttgart by chance, living with relatives in the countryside. Johann wept, grateful she was alive, that his desperate escape hadn't been necessary. That Christmas, Maxwell organized a celebration. Prisoners received Red Cross packages, sang German carols, decorated barracks. A small tree strung with generator-powered lights stood in the hall. Johann watched Americans and Germans share space peacefully, thinking of the desert windmill, how close he had come to dying for nothing, how Maxwell's philosophy of kindness had saved his life and his humanity. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. Camp Bowie began repatriation. Johann was delayed by paperwork. Before he left, Maxwell called him to his office, aged but steady. "I wanted to give you something," he said, offering an envelope of letters from Hutchins and Farmer's character references. Johann, stunned. "Why would they do this? I'm the enemy." Maxwell gently corrected him. "You were. Now you're just a man trying to rebuild his life." Johann reflected. "Your kindness defeated me more thoroughly than any battle could." Maxwell smiled. "Wars end, but hatred lingers unless we choose to end it. Every prisoner treated with dignity was one less man teaching his children to hate." Johann left for Germany, the desert eternal and indifferent, but something had changed inside the wire. Men had learned that humanity transcended borders. Years later, historians studied Camp Bowie as a case in kindness defeating ideology. Prisoners returned to Germany telling stories that challenged propaganda, many becoming advocates for peace and reconciliation. Johann found his mother alive in Stuttgart, helped rebuild the city, and shared Maxwell's letters with his children. When his daughter asked why Americans had treated him well, he replied, "Because some people understand that the only way to end war is to refuse to let it make you cruel. Your enemy remains human." Colonel Maxwell retired in 1946, unrecognized publicly, but his philosophy endured through former prisoners, shaping Germany's post-war rebuilding and mindset. The camp closed, reclaimed by desert. The windmill still stands, turning in the Texas wind a quiet testament to mercy, persistence, and the power of kindness to transform even the hardest hearts.